Hello everyone and welcome back to the Plutonium Show. And the countdown begins. The countdown to what, you may ask? Well, I'm sure you've all seen the Netflix sneak peek that just dropped, and if that sneak peek is anything to go by...
But you and I are so similar. You and I are like, we should have met a long time ago.
Then all the billboards in Times Square, which, yes, it's being advertised there, ain't gonna fix or save anything. I mean, remember archetypes and all the advertising for that in Times Square as well? Didn't save it from flopping and dying a very early, sad death. Public death. The comment section, as always, as ever, is the true source of entertainment here. I screen grabbed just a couple of them from a few days ago. They were so funny. Get a load of this. This user says, Roy Choi, you and I are so similar. Megan, just so you know, I'm 47% Asian. This one says, you know how the soundtrack goes? And finally, the only thing authentic about this trailer is the comments. Absolutely. Bravo. There's obviously a lot more where that came from, but I just thought it was gold. Oh, and we actually have more proof that this was all a rushed job, a last minute thing to get ahead of the leaks rather than, oh, we kept it quiet for so long because I've been working behind the scenes. Because guess what? As ever, products, as per the Daily Mail, won't be ready until a few months after Netflix show launch. I mean, what a waste. What a catastrophe, especially considering she bragged that Netflix is her business partner. If this is the level of business that they are capable of, wow. Good to see that their millions, their hundreds of millions potentially, are being wasted on such an atrocity. Now, Meghan is, of course, excited in the lead up to her show, or at least she wants us to think she is, because I think she's probably biting her nails, completely nervous, if she's even capable of feeling nerves, actually. That woman has nerves of steel. Does anyone remember how she was like a robot down that aisle at her wedding day? But she's got this whole countdown thing happening on her Instagram, you know, evil social media Instagram where children have to be protected. I'm sure you know exactly where I'm going with this. First, she posts this reel showing off her goofy side, this new side to her that I suppose perhaps was evident before she met Harry, but that we hadn't seen in almost a decade now, which was probably meant to be a clapback to the bullying allegations that seem to be following her everywhere. The questions did kind of come up with Jason Kanoff's interview with 60 Minutes Australia. They didn't go there. Jason Kanoff, as ever, being a gentleman and answering in a very diplomatic way. But those rumors and those allegations, rather, are going to dog her probably for the rest of her life. And she deserves it. If she really did what she's been accused of, and I think at this point with accusations across the pond, everywhere, all over the world actually, accusations from Australia as well, I think we all know what's more likely true than not at this point. Whether the palace buries the report doesn't really change anything, and in fact some would say burying the report is confirmation, really, more than anything else. But she posts that as a countdown. And then yesterday, my nosy self, visits her Instagram and I see she's got stories up. And lo and behold, she's got her kid, Lilibet, again, after featuring her without her face for Valentine's Day. Now she's got an even clearer view of her and what she's wearing. Keep note of that. And of course, alongside Auntie Serena Williams. I've always said Meghan is a troll. So if she's doing this on purpose, then I wouldn't be surprised. But in this instance, I also wouldn't be surprised if she was actually that tone deaf. With all the criticism about cutting off your family, both sides of your family, No one's invited to the wedding apart from your mother because you need her for your race card. And she has the audacity to call Serena Williams an auntie, when this little girl has an auntie in the UK who is the future queen of England, the future queen of the United Kingdom. It just tone deaf or deliberate? You let me know, because I can't with Meghan. I can't put myself in her shoes because she has a twisted mind. It doesn't operate in the way that most of us do, our brains. But note how I told you to remember, put a little mark on Lilibet's pajama being on full display. Later on, a page that is known to merch both Meghan's and honestly even Catherine's and other royals' clothing posted this on their story. Just flat out merching Lilibet's pajama set, of course alongside Meghan's. Now you could say that this is not Meghan's fault and these people run these pages and it's kind of their thing to find and source what these royals or ex-royals, I should say, are wearing. But considering the child wasn't facing the camera and you couldn't see her top, you couldn't see the red heart on the pajama, still can't see it. How did this page know exactly what pajama top she was wearing? I think unless it was a set and they figured out through the pants, whatever it is, the child is officially on the market. Forget invasion of privacy. They are now slowly going to become money-making machines. Make no mistake. And it's interesting that Meghan is focusing on Lilibet, the girl. She has her on her as ever landing page as well. Because usually narcissistic mothers, this is how they operate. When the little girl is little, the little ones are littling, they're okay because they're not really threatening the mom yet. But wait until Lily grows up, hits her teens, starts blossoming. Meghan's in her 50s. And if she's anything like the other narcissistic mothers that I have the immense misfortune of either knowing or coming across or having heard of, Lily is in for a very difficult ride. And it makes me sad to say, but this is a very real problem that many daughters suffer from. And I'm sure many of you might even be watching this video right now. What's really interesting to me, or rather not interesting, but just something to note, is with that whole Instagram reel where she's being goofy, and also the reel she posted where she announced as ever, because the leaks were getting ahead of her. Notice how she's completely, yet again, in complete Meghan style, very loyal to her brand actually, changed the persona that she wants to be to promote this show. So last year, when it was still American Riviera Orchard, which is now dead in the water officially, go check out the trademarks website. It literally says dead, abandoned. A typical Meghan style, right? But remember how her aesthetic when she released that weird story to announce it was all about, black ball gown in a fancy big house, kind of the royal housewife vibe she was going for. And now she's done a complete 180 and is going for earthy, down in the dirt, literally easygoing, easy breezy, no makeup or barely any makeup, hair tied up in a messy ponytail kind of vibe. And it really got me thinking, is Meghan Markle's constant rebranding, is that resilience to be applauded, to be commended, or is it shamelessness? Hear me out. Think of all the embarrassing things that have happened to her, all of the instances where she's been called an effing grifter by a Spotify executive, how they showed their face at the Jubilee despite the Oprah interview a year prior. How Trump called her terrible in public, the current president of her country. And nothing seems to faze her. The Vanity Fair article, the Hollywood Reporter, this woman is almost impossible to stop. And some might say that's resilient. And initially, earlier, before I knew what she was about, and before I realized the obvious personality problems that she unfortunately suffers from, I would have agreed. I would have said, this woman doesn't give up. But there is a difference between not giving up and refusing to fix yourself, refusing to go away, regroup, rethink, and self-reflect. Think about, why was I called an effing grifter? Why was I booed at the Jubilee? Why is Trump calling me terrible? Whatever it is. Why are these bullying allegations following me everywhere I go, every corner of the earth? That never crosses her mind. These thoughts and these questions never cross her mind. And the problem is, when these questions never cross your mind, you never stop to think to fix yourself, right? How can you fix yourself if you never notice that there's something wrong with you? And that's why she's stuck in this infinite loop of rebranding and embarrassment, rebranding, embarrassment, rebranding, embarrassment. It's been never ending now for at least 5 years since Megxit. And from the looks of it, based on the comment section of this Netflix sneak peek, and based on the sneak peek itself, so dry, so boring, so fake. It looks like she's stuck in another one of those cycles yet again. And if she wasn't so darn evil, I'd actually feel sorry for her. I mean, sometimes I do. You just see her flailing in public, trying to do something with her image, and nothing is working because she's not working on herself. If you're a problematic individual, your brand, especially if you don't listen to other people who can fix your image, at least publicly, your brand is never going to work because it just seeps through. There are many people who are problematic, but they listen to their PR people. But back to the question of, is this resilience or is it shamelessness or something else? Most of us, if someone called us an effing grifter so publicly, if Dior, I forgot about Dior, literally denies the lies that we've been spreading about being signed to them. If we were booed at the Jubilee because of this atrocious interview full of lies that we spewed about our own family. If we did half the things Meghan Markle did along with Prince Harry, I think a lot of us would be too embarrassed to even leave the house. In fact, some of us may have done incredibly minor things in comparison, and we still feel too embarrassed to leave the house. Because we have what's known as shame. And we're embarrassed and we want to fix whatever it is that we did that put us in that situation. So that's where the shamelessness aspect comes. I mean, there are people who, I don't want to compare Meghan to a murderer, but there is a level of shamelessness that is pathological. Like Jodi Arias, I'm sure you've all heard of her, and we've compared her to Meghan before. Many people do. Before she murdered her victim, which again, I'm not comparing Meghan to a murderer, but there are similarities in their patterns of behavior. Before she did that, she stalked him because he didn't want her. He didn't like her back. He wanted nothing to do with her. And so instead of giving up and honoring that, she stalked him until he wasn't alive anymore. And trust me, they think they're being resilient. They think they're being heroic. They think they're the tragic hero in their story. The whole world's against them, or my love is against me, but I won't give up. In Meghan's case, the entire world is against her in her own mind, but she is the heroine who just doesn't quit. We'll see how this show of hers turns out. It debuts tomorrow, of course. And unfortunately, I will be putting myself through it, probably in double speed, so I can half the amount of time of torture. But I might be wrong. It may be an absolute success and her resilience would have paid off. But I suppose we'll just have to wait and see. In other news, the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni case just keeps progressing and keeps getting messier and messier. First, we have the New York Times filing a motion to dismiss on the 28th of February, so late last week, asking the judge to remove them from the lawsuit altogether. So initially there was a separate filing against them filed in California. That has been dropped and they have now been lumped in. Well, not now, happened a while ago, but they were lumped in with the rest of the defendants in the amended complaint. So they're basically saying there are so many things going on in this lawsuit, and what we are being accused of is so small. It's basically just contained in one page, page 166 of the amended complaint, when nothing else has to do with us. So why are we being lumped in with this humongous lawsuit? Then they move on to focus on the specific causes of action against them, which include defamation, promissory fraud, and breach of implied contract. So for defamation, they're arguing that 2 defenses apply to them, and therefore the case should be dismissed at this early stage. The first defense they're claiming is the fair report privilege. Now, as you can probably tell from the name of the defense, the fair report privilege protects any fair and true report of any judicial proceeding, legislative proceeding, or other official proceeding. Now, judicial proceedings also include quasi-judicial proceedings, which the California civil complaint falls under. However, that's not enough. For this defense to succeed, there are 2 conditions that must be satisfied. First of all, the report must give a substantially accurate account of a judicial or official document. And secondly, the report must attribute its allegations to that document. So basically, it's meant to be a summary of the official document that they are reporting on. They say many more things, but I'm trying to keep things brief. So what I did is I went back and I reread the article, and I wanted to see, is it an accurate and fair report of Blake Lively's complaint, or did it go beyond? Because when I read it the first time, I felt as though it went beyond merely reporting. I felt as though they were furthering the narrative. They were contributing to it and adding their own flair to it. I pulled out a few sentences, so let me know what you think in the comments below. First of all, they're covered in the headline because it contains the word alleged. So that works in their favor. But can we say the same for the body of the article? First line that caught my attention. The effort to tarnish Miss Lively appears to have paid off. I don't know about you, but that to me doesn't read as a fair report, that line in particular, of what was happening. It reads like a narrative. It reads like their own story in furtherance of Blake's complaint. And that's just the first example. Because they're saying the efforts to tarnish Miss Lively appears to have paid off. So they're giving credibility to these efforts. It looks like it's worked. Next comes, meanwhile, an online backlash against Miss Lively was underway. It is impossible to know how much of the negative publicity was seeded by Miss Nathan, Mr. Wallace, and their team, and how much they noticed and amplified. So again, this line doesn't merely summarize or report on what Blake is alleging. It's giving her story credibility. It's saying that according to the New York Times, it's impossible to ascertain what's been seeded and what's been amplified. At least that's how it reads to me. They also implied that the journalist Kirsty Flott was in on it, despite mentioning in their article that she did reach out and deny it and said that she acted independently. But they say this, it wasn't the first time that Miss Flott had posted a video aligned with a client of Miss Nathan. In 2022, in the midst of Mr. Depp's legal battle with Miss Heard, Miss Flott posted clips of her interviews with the actor tagged #Justice for Johnny Depp. So I performed a quick search for Johnny Depp's name in Blake's initial complaint with the California Department of Civil Rights, and I couldn't find a single reference to Miss Flaw having previously aligned herself with clients of Miss Melissa Nathan. So what does that mean? The New York Times added in their 2 cents yet again. They're not just summarizing what was in the report. This was not at all mentioned in the report, and the implication here, at least to me, is Miss Flaw, she can deny it as much as she wants, but it looks like she has a pattern of trying to take down people that Miss Nathan allegedly wants to take down. First being Amber Heard, which we all know, that was an organic backlash against a woman who abused her husband and defamed him. And now Blake Lively. So it's not looking good for the New York Times. And finally, by mid-August, the team was reveling in the damage to Miss Lively's image. This seems to be a statement of fact rather than a summary of what was being reported. Because in the complaint, yes, you have a bunch of text messages, which we now know were taken out of context and doctored. But you can say, all right, the New York Times didn't know. They didn't know any better. They didn't have access to Justin Baldoni's texts, which I didn't know, by the way, until I read their filing, their motion to dismiss. I thought they received text messages from Brian Friedman, but they say they didn't. So they only had one side of the story, and they probably believed it. But my point is, they're not simply reporting, they are adding their own 2 cents. And the New York Times has a lot of gravitas, from what I understand. And so when they say something, it really lends credibility to whatever story it is that they're pushing. So I'm not too sure whether the 2 conditions of fair report privilege have been clearly satisfied, at least not at this early stage where it warrants a dismissal. You know, there's further testing to be done, I would say, and that will potentially take place in trial if their motion to dismiss fails. The second defense they are relying on with defamation is protected opinion. And they're arguing that the use of the word smear campaign, which apparently wasn't used in Blake Lively's complaint, I could have sworn it was. But regardless, they're saying that was our opinion based on all the evidence that Blake Lively provided us with. So we summarized her report, and then we formed an opinion based on this summary that a smear campaign was being conducted against Blake. I don't know if I buy it. They cite a lot of case law, but the thing you have to know with lawyers is we cherry pick case law. We cherry pick precedent that helps our argument. That's literally all we do in law school for training as well. I mean, it's one thing to say that in your opinion this was happening, but that's just not how it read. But I could be wrong in the sense that perhaps their defense will succeed. We'll see. Really quickly, because I'm running out of time, they're also arguing that promissory fraud, the allegation of promissory fraud, which is basically Justin and his team are alleging that the New York Times promised that they wouldn't publish before noon, and they wanted to get their side of the story, and then they lied and published at 10 a.m. But the New York Times explains in this motion to dismiss that that's not actually what happened. What happened was, according to them, this is yet another case of he said, she said, but they've attached the communications. I don't have access to them, unfortunately. Every time I find lawsuits online, the filings, I don't get the exhibits. Apparently, they've attached the communications with Justin's side as exhibits. But they say what we said is, we're giving you until noon tomorrow to respond. And they responded by 11 p.m. that night. And they made no sign of providing any further information. And so they published at 10 a.m. because the parties responded the night before. Does that make sense? It wasn't a deadline for publication. It was a deadline for a response. And so since they responded 12 hours prior, the New York Times said, well, we had no reason to wait. We never told them we were going to wait to publish at 12. So they published at 10. And so there was no breach of a promise, effectively is what they're arguing. The false light invasion of privacy claim, basically painting someone in a false light, a negative light, fails because New York doesn't actually recognize that tort, which was very interesting to me because the initial filing was filed in California, which apparently does recognize false light invasion of privacy. So there is no cause of action or no such cause of action in New York. Before I end the episode, there are a few more updates. Blake hired an ex-CIA operative, the ex-deputy chief of staff, Nick Shapiro, as her PR crisis manager. And this is all in the midst of a battle between the two sides, where we mentioned how Blake filed for a very strict protective order for the discovery process. And the other side is arguing that it is way too strict and completely unnecessary and unwarranted. They have both written letters to the judge to argue their sides. I'm not sure if a decision has been made on that yet, but it just got me thinking about how Blake clearly had no idea what kind of a mess she was getting herself into. And I wouldn't be saying this if the evidence she was providing was convincing, because I've been following this case from the beginning, and so far, on the balance of probabilities, or as you guys say in the States, the preponderance of the evidence, I am convinced by Justin's side. So I'm not saying that filing a complaint, if it's an earnest complaint, is a mistake. It doesn't matter what a mess you get yourself into if you're doing the right thing, if it's in furtherance of the truth. But in this instance, I don't know. I just get the sense that Blake didn't think this through and had no idea how far this was going to go. And now look at her. It's a mess. She's got an ex-CIA operative as a PR crisis manager. It's funny. She can hire a PR crisis manager. That's fine. But if Justin does it, it's not to protect himself, but it's to destroy her. The double standards. I can improvise kisses on the set. I can kiss you whenever I want and however many times I want. But when you do it, which we don't even have proof that he did it, she's referring to the slow dancing scene we've seen 100 times now. But when he does it, it's sexual harassment. I just don't get it with these women. Don't they realize that all they're doing is diminishing the actual cause? You know, what Amber Heard did? It was a mockery of actual victims of domestic violence. And if Blake is indeed fabricating her allegations, then it will be a mockery of actual victims of sexual harassment. Some people even say that Taylor Swift, who successfully countersued someone that she alleged sexually harassed her, the fact that she's not siding with her is proof that Blake is not being honest. Now, I'm not necessarily going to accept that because people have their own agendas. Taylor might just be that selfish where she's like, I don't care what you're going through. Keep my name out of this. I want nothing to do with this because Blake's going down. No matter which way you look at it, Blake's going down. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Blake is lying, or anyone in her position rather would be lying. You'd be surprised how many people, when the going gets tough, you'd be surprised how they just cut you loose. They let you drown all by yourself, sink or swim. Sorry, I don't know you. Don't know you anymore. But let me know what you think about all these things. Is the New York Times right to file this motion to dismiss? And do you think that Taylor's attitude towards this whole case speaks volumes of Blake's credibility? I don't know much about Taylor, but even though I'm younger than her, I was never a fan, ever. So, yeah, I don't really have a good read on her. I did have a quick correction I wanted to make actually before I closed off. I mentioned Jed Wallace 2 weeks ago, who was suing Blake Lively in Texas for defamation, and I said that it's for what was said in the New York Times article, but it turns out he's chosen to attack the actual civil rights complaint and claim that it's not protected by absolute privilege. Normally, anything she says in that complaint would be privileged and you can't sue. But he's arguing it's not because she disseminated the complaint with news outlets. I just thought it would have been a lot more straightforward to attack the New York Times article That's just a correction I had to make. All right, that's about all the time I have for today. Thank you all so much for joining me. Wish me luck for tomorrow. Meghan's show. Oh boy. But I'll definitely be back with my review, I suppose. I think they're dropping all the episodes in one hit. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I might, eat my own words and say, oh my God, guys, it was actually great. I doubt it. But always keep an open mind. That's what I've learned in my short time on this planet. All right, everyone, take care, and I'll see you next time.